Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for today's webinar. My name is Aileen Carroll, and I do sustainability communications for OneClick LCA. We are excited to get into the topic today, and we will be starting shortly. But real quick, before we start, I'd love it if you could jump into the chat, let us know who you are, where you're signing in from, and what your role is, what your interest is in BREEAM version 7, which is the topic of today's conversation. So we'll get right into it. We're going to be talking about delivering embodied carbon compliance under BREEAM version 7, what project teams need to know. And as a note, OneClick LCA is an approved tool, so we will be talking a little bit about our tool later on in the webinar. Now, as we go through, we have some presentation segments, and we're also going to have an expert discussion. During any portion of today's webinar, if you have a question, please drop it into the chat or into the questions tab. We will be monitoring those throughout the webinar and answering your questions in the chat, and we'll also have a live Q&A at the end. So if you guys have any questions, please do drop them there in the chat. And today I am joined by Steven Zelstra from OneClick LCA. He is a product marketing manager, and he specializes in translating complex sustainability solutions into clear customer value. So he helps organizations meet their environmental goals while also driving business success. So welcome, Steven. And also today we are joined by Alejandro Romero, who is a principal consultant at BRE. And as science lead for embodied carbon and circularity, he's overseeing the update of the BREEAM version 7's carbon methodology, which we're going to get to in a little more detail. So welcome, Ale. Now, today's host is OneClick LCA. Most of you are probably familiar with us, but if anyone is new here, we are the world's #1 AI-powered LCA platform, and we cover every industry. We work towards powering 1 million makers of a zero carbon future by 2035, and we do that through our software platform, through our online education platform, the OneClick LCA Academy, and through webinars like these. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for your work that you do in decarbonization. A few quick notes about us. Our platform gives you access to over 400,000 LCA data sets. We have tools to help you comply with over 140 different standards and methods, including BREEAM version 7, which we'll be talking about in just a moment. And we've been powering the makers of a zero carbon future for over 20 years. Those makers are you. So thank you again for joining us and for the work that you guys do in decarbonization. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Alejandro, who's going to give a presentation about BREEAM version 7. So Ale, over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Aileen, for the introduction. Yes, as she just mentioned, my name is Ale Romero. I'm the principal consultant for embodied carbon and resources at BREEAM. And yeah, I guess I am the brains behind the version 7 update for the latest version of BREEAM, and I'm very excited to be here today. So initially what we're going to do is I'm just going to take you through some of the changes that we made for BREEAM version 7 around embodied carbon and how you can deliver compliance around those. So yeah, just to set the scene a little bit, I just wanted to speak about BREEAM Extraction version 7 and some of the key changes and the context around that. So obviously we released the manual in October 2025, and alongside the release of the manual, we also delivered the BREEAM platform, which is now the new digital platform in which all things BREEAM happen. We have restructured some of the categories for added clarity and usability. This was all based on consultation and user feedback, and we've also looked at greater alignment with European and UK carbon policies. So I think it's no news that when we envisaged version 7, this was very much a carbon update for the manual, although we ended up doing a little bit more than that. There was an emphasis around climate resilience and whole life carbon performance, and that's been translated into the new BREEAM platform. To set some of the things that we looked at, obviously some of the key revision drivers we've been involved in and we wanted to align with include some of the EU taxonomy alignment pieces. We've also looked in at the UK Net Zero Carbon Building Standard, which was released recently, and also the RICS Whole Life Carbon version 2. And we also did a consultation piece, and I've also worked one-to-one with some of the assessors to make some of those changes. More specifically around embodied carbon changes for version 7. So I don't think it's news to anyone here that when we talk about embodied carbon in BREEAM, we're talking about really material 01, and then that ties in obviously with MATO 2 and some of the issues around MATO 3 and waste 01. But this update for MATO 1, like I like to call it MATO 1, so the updates and the changes that we have included for new construction and the new scheme around RFO, which will be released soon, has looked at harmonizing some of the whole life cycle approach that we've had up to this point. We looked at the scientific view, and we have now established a consistent method for reporting, which is one of the key ingredients here, and also for benchmarking around embodied carbon performance. Alongside that, we've streamlined the credit awarding process in the category, and we have also released Guidance Note 51, which sets the backbone for anything that has to do with embodied carbon in version 7. GN 51 is a guidance note, by the way. Furthermore, some of the version 7 embodied carbon criteria has changed. If you're used to International 2016 or UK 2018 version 6, some of the structure around those has changed. Some of it remains the same with some tweaks. So at the moment, one of the big changes that we've done, we now require a life cycle assessment. It's kind of key to say LCA at this stage, because obviously I think it's important to highlight that version 7 is not just an embodied carbon update, it's an LCA update. But we now have requirements around the delivery of concept stage, technical design and post-construction LCA. So that sort of drives forward that design trajectory around the entire life cycle of the construction process for buildings in BREEAM. And also a key change that we have included is the inclusion of minimum standards for MATO 1. This is brand new for version 7. So now we have requirements around excellent and outstanding. So for excellent BREEAM, you now need to do some level of LCA at any stage of the ones that I just said. And also for outstanding, you now have to do all of the stages. So you would have to complete an embodied carbon assessment for concept stage, technical design, and post-construction. We have developed some embodied carbon benchmarks for most building types because we relied on some of the data that we had. A lot of that study was done for using the background data that we have from previous BREEAM assessments, but we also looked at the literature review of existing research. For example, OneClick also has a lot of embodied carbon data, but I've also been involved in the creation of the built environment carbon database, which looked at benchmarking and also obviously the upfront carbon limits that we have that have recently been published for the UK Net Zero Carbon Building Standard. Another new credit that's been included is the submission of LCA and associated data to public database. I've included a link there to the BECD, but basically what we want to encourage here is the publication of or disclosure of carbon data. We have continued to include the credit around third-party verification of LCA. That's been there since 2018 in the UK, and it's been included now as a new credit in the international manual. This is a credit that was well received in 2018, so we have tightened some of the requirements around that based on consultation feedback, and I'm hoping it will have a good uptake in the international market as well. And then last, in terms of reporting, we have looked at the output reporting of RICS Whole Life Carbon version 2, which is very similar to how other European countries do it. So there is not a big discrepancy there, and some of the alignment around UK Net Zero Carbon Building Standard, which obviously follows RICS Whole Life Carbon version 2. And then just to get into more of the sort of detail here, some of the embodied carbon and LCA methodology and the scope, that's obviously included in GN 51. It's also included in the manual if people want to look at the detail on it. But just to give you a quick overview of this, we continue to have a requirement around the use of recognized tools for BREEAM. This is to ensure that the LCA tools that are used within BREEAM are in line with the BREEAM methodology. And in this instance, what happens is the tools have to undergo a technical evaluation by BRE, which includes a fee and a number of evidence that needs to be that is required. In terms of project stages around the scope, like I said, so for interim design stage certification, you will need to do the early design LCA, which typically needs to be submitted within 20 working days of planning application. That leaves enough room for people to prepare. And then obviously you also have to submit the technical design LCA, which is required for the design stage interim certification. For the post-construction BREEAM certification, you will also need to update your LCA to use as-built data for the post-construction if you want to target those credits. In terms of environmental indicators, BREEAM as a whole tends to align with standards. In this case, we align with EN 15978 around the LCA and EN 15804 around the EPD. So we appreciate not all tools have all of the indicators within those standards. So usually we require the core indicators to be submitted, but in terms of the formatting that we have prescribed for the manual, the rule is around the inclusion of all relevant indicators that are within that tool. For the lifecycle stages, again, so the required modules are those in line with 15978, so the standard. We require the submission of data and calculation for modules A1 to A5, B1 to B5. We exclude B6 and B7. In this case, we exclude them not because we don't want to have them within BREEAM, but those are actually part of other issues, so the energy and the water categories within BREEAM. And then we also include modules C1 and C4 and module D, unless A2 EPDs are unavailable. And we will talk about the difference between A1 and A2 perhaps later and how we can work around this in the use of BREEAM. In terms of building elements, so we have built the BREEAM platform to sort of guide you through that process, but basically, so we have basically a digital system that will allow you to submit all the data in the correct structure around the building elements, but anything that's within the remit of your BREEAM assessment should be included in your embodied carbon and LCL calculations. And we have used RICS NRM for the building structure, but what's key here in terms of usability for software users is the recognized tool. So in this case, one-click LCA will already output the results of your embodied carbon calculations in the correct element mapping. So you don't have to do anything. At the moment, we have a copy-paste functionality with the BREEAM platform, but we are working to implement in the near future an API between our platforms. So if you're working on one-click LCA, you'll be able to transfer all that data automatically to the BREEAM platform. So yeah, I think that's a good overview of what BREEAM has done for version 7. Hopefully, I've seen the chat on the screen with people posting different links to the manuals and different links to Guidance Note 15. So further information can be found there, but I'm always happy to answer some questions around this.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that information. A lot that you went over there. So now we are going to have a little bit more of a discussion. So I'm going to minimize that slide there. And we'll be talking about sort of what this all means in practice. And the first question, Ale, is for you. You just went over a lot of changes and updates, but what are the most significant methodological updates regarding embodied carbon specifically, and how will they affect LCA workflows?
Yes, of course. So like I said, one of the things that we really tried to do with version 7 was to do stakeholder engagement around the update, especially for MATA 1, which is one of the critical issues within BREEAM. So we took a lot of feedback, external feedback, and we tried to develop an issue that was in line with market expectations around carbon. And that obviously also ties in with the development of the BREEAM platform. So what version 7 really does is it tightens a lot of the requirements around the whole life carbon, and it tries to tell a whole story. So it ties in when you go into the BREEAM platform, for example, it connects really well with energy and water categories. Another thing that we developed that I think should help BREEAM users a lot is the development of the Guidance Note 51, which wasn't them before. And I think it's a document that people can then use to to relate to a common methodological use of MATA 1. It explains all the methodologic requirements around MATA 1. The other thing that I mentioned earlier was the use of the multi-stage LCA becoming more like quote unquote business as usual. So obviously now we have the narrative around the use of LCA calculations and embodied carbon around design, construction, and post-construction LCA. And that's not just the sort of single design snapshot that we're trying to capture there within BREEAM. We've obviously included the more explicit benchmarking. So for 2016 International, we didn't have any benchmarking. And for 2018 version 6 in the UK, we had some sort of benchmarks around an indicator called echo points, which were more black box. So we're trying to be more transparent. The BREEAM benchmarks will be published online soon with the reissue of new construction that we have coming earlier this year, earlier in the new year. And then obviously the inclusion of minimum standards for Matter 1, that's new. So now we have minimum standards around excellent and outstanding. And I guess the last thing I wanted to say was around the verification expectations. So obviously this is new for international users, and I expect we'll have some questions around that. We've got a lot of guidance on this in GN51 and the manual, but I think the expectation here is that we get people to do that third-party verification as good practice. And hopefully the way that obviously we're now recognizing tools such as one-click LCA, the BREEAM platform will integrate that sort of communication level, which will make it a lot easier for people to then do the work in one-click LCA and then be able to evidence that within the BREEAM platform.
Perfect. Thank you so much. The next question is actually for both of you, so feel free, either one of you, to jump in. How does the inclusion of both EN 15804 A1 and A2 frameworks shape the way assessors and consultants prepare data for submission?
Maybe you can go first and then I'll go.
Yeah, so sorry, I thought I was muted. Yeah, so one of the things that we're obviously dealing with at the moment is, I think some people still get confused around the
I think, LA froze, so maybe you can take it, Stephen.
Yeah, no worries. So we have created two separate tools on our end, one for having +A1 data and +A2, which I think is a quite pragmatic and kind of the only approach we could have, because many UK projects still rely on the older EPDs, which are aligned with CML or EN 15804 +A1. So for as a consultant, you have to work with, let's say, a broad set of EPDs. Some of them are +A1, some of them are +A2. That can of course be tricky. So how our tools work is that if you work with either the +A1 tool or the +A2 tool, it flags automatically if you can use data or not. Or if you include all data to your first design and you add, for example, the +A2 tool, it will tell you which ones you cannot use. So this detection of EPDs for different standards is done automatically. And if if the data set, let's say, does not comply with the tool you are using, it will automatically give you a warning. So you don't really have the chance of accidentally mixing this kind of data. In the longer run, how that's going to work, I'm not sure, because of course the EN 15804 +A1 technically ended in July 2022, so there shouldn't be any new data with this scheme, but we have to see how that goes in the future. Yeah, unfortunately, we lost Alejandro. He will be back.
Here he is.
There he is already.
There we go. Sorry, I'm having a terrible day with my internet. This doesn't usually happen. I apologize.
No problem.
But yeah, I heard what you say, Stephen. Yeah, obviously we're currently coexisting in this in-between world around A1 and A2 data. So obviously we've as you know, we've approved two different versions of the tool, A1 and A2, because we need to separate those EPDs. But I'm hoping that obviously as the A2 standards and the EPDs grow more in the market, we'll be able to shift to A2 only data, and then that would simplify the process for everyone. But yeah, I appreciate that we're kind of coexisting in this in-between world at the moment.
And maybe just to add there, industry-wise, that the BRE is not the only one who has this issue. Like literally every scheme that is currently switching to a different standard has this problem. Some, of course, are doing it a little bit easier if they just report carbon, because then you can technically use both schemes in the same time. But when you do a full LCA, these standards cannot coexist in that same manner. So we have to separate them.
Yes.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you both. Ale, this next question is for you. How will BREEAM V7 be applicable to countries that have their own BREEAM setup, for example, Norway or Sweden?
Elaine, can you hear us?
I can. Could you not hear my question?
I think it might be the platform.
Okay.
I can hear it fine, but I don't know.
Can you hear me fine?
Now you can. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. I cannot hear Aileen.
Okay, no worries. So the question Aileen was asking is how do we deal with countries that have their own national implementation of BREEAM? So, for example, Norway and Sweden have their own, let's say, setups that are not really aligned with BREEAM International to the same extent. For
Yes.
example, UK.
Yes. Yeah. Of course, yeah. So I guess just to set a little bit of context to that question, for people that don't know, we have something called national scheme operators, which basically run BREEAM on behalf of us for certain countries, Norway and Sweden being two of them. We also have it in Germany, Spain, and the Netherlands. So usually the way that works is they'll operate BREEAM under a license. Usually it's the Green Building Council of that country that runs it. And the way that we work with them is we adapt BREEAM. Well, they'll take the BREEAM, in this case, version 7 that we adopted, and they'll be adapting that to the local codes and the local markets. Kind of like the workflow for those things usually is around, I'll develop, or we will develop the core science, and in this case around LCA and GN51, like I mentioned earlier. That's developed centrally within BREEAM. That's then taken over by the NSOs, and then they usually adapt that to their market. So that doesn't mean that, like what we do is what they have to do. They're able to then shape that nationally. We have been working with Sweden and Norway on the manuals, and in practical terms, what usually happens is that they'll be able to provide feedback back to us, and then we'll discuss what those changes are and whether they're okay to be applied to their version of BREEAM. Usually the answer is yes, because they're very good and they're very competent, and they're able to shape their science in a way that it's obviously well suited to in this case Norway and Sweden. So we have, I guess what I'm trying to say is that we have that level of flexibility integrated within the approach that we have in BREEAM, and we appreciate that, obviously, especially as LCA and embodied carbon is an ever evolving field. We can then work with other national countries so that they can shape science that's in line with what's expected there.
Perfect, thanks. And then this next one, Stephen, is for you.
Sorry, Stephen, I can only hear you. I cannot hear Aileen. Not sure
Stephen,
why.
can you hear me?
That is so weird. I can hear you fine, Aileen. I don't know
perfect.
what's going on.
Well, then this will be, I hope the audience can hear me. Please let me know if you can't. Okay.
Audience
perfect.
can hear you.
Yes, great. Okay, so Stephen, what challenges...
I'm just going to drop off and drop back in. 1 second.
Yeah, sure.
Perfect. What challenges do project teams face when integrating embodied carbon assessments early in design, and what practical steps can help ensure compliance?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a good question, especially since now for BREEAM we have to do these kind of assessments at the concept stage. So of course, rule of thumb when starting this kind of assessment, the earlier we do it, the, let's say, wider our reach potentially can be, because the savings can be much bigger. The biggest challenge isn't the carbon modeling itself. So a lot of design teams, they're still maybe used to working in a bit too linear way. So decisions on what kind of materials we are going to specify, they might already be made before we actually decide on doing our life cycle assessment calculation or opening our tool. So the best fix to that is just to start early. So doing a quick stage 2 baseline, for example, with one of our tools called Carbon Designer 3D, it's a really easy way to do it and to understand the scale of the impact already at a really early stage. And of course, within our software, we also have a lot of these kind of assemblies. So you take, for example, a wall element or whatnot, and it will already tell you all the materials included to this element. So you can already have access to quite detailed data at the really early stage. And then, of course, as the design matures, so when you have to redo it, also the technical stage, and later at post construction, you can of course refine it and update it as your construction basically progresses. So we have made this kind of statement many times, but teams should treat lifecycle assessment as a design process. So it's not just a reporting exercise to get our certificate and whatnot. But if you take it that way, you will have a much more smoother process generally through through the path to, let's say, getting your BREEAM V7 certificate or compliance.
Yeah, great. Or starting earlier is better. Ali, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay,
Perfect.
beautiful.
I couldn't even
Perfect.
see you earlier. Sorry.
That's totally okay. I'm glad you can hear me now because this next question is for you. How does tool recognition under BREEAM version 7 ensure data consistency and reduce verification errors across different projects?
Yeah, that's a great question because it's something that sits at the backbone or the core idea around the tool recognition for BREEAM. So, as we mentioned before, one of the key things around Matter 1 is the acceptance of recognized LCA tools, such as one-click LCA, and not just any LCA tool. And obviously that ensures that we can formally recognize tools for Matter 1 and Matter 2. And that's based on a very specific technical evaluation that's applied across all of the tools that we evaluate that takes into account things like data sets, calculation sets, and very key evidence outputs that we require for BREEAM. This is the sort of go-to way of ensuring that all of the BREEAM LCA recognized tools are then, we're basically providing assurance for assessors and LCA consultants to ensure that they are using tools that follow BREEAM methodology and outputs. Now, of course, with the inclusion of the BREEAM platform, we're also trying to ensure that all of those tools are aligned with the outputs that are required for the BREEAM platform. And this is, in a way, trying to ensure that there is an easier workflow for LCA assessors now that we have BREEAM in a digital space. Recognition of the tools also ensures that some of those QA checks around the methodology are already done at that stage and they don't have to worry them about later. So, for example, they'll be able to produce outputs that are already in line with all of the GN51 requirements. So the use of correct lifecycle modules, the data hierarchy around EPDs, and the use of generic in the UK alignment with the RICS whole carbon compliance. We also have, obviously, I guess another point would be around benchmarking, or the use on, or like comparability around the benchmarking. If you're using a tool like one-click LCA, it ensures that obviously we have aligned schemas and templates and the full mappings. It means that we have more consistent data sets. Yeah, just trying to facilitate the process for BREEAM users and one-click users so that they, there's a more of a automatic workflow when they're working.
Yeah, make it easy. That's always helpful. Perfect. And then a follow on to that, Stephen, how does one-click LCA's tool operationalize compliance? So in terms of automating EPD management, evidence generation, and credit calculation?
Yeah, good question. So of course we have always supported the latest BREEAM schemes, like for many years back. So the tools are always designed to get exactly that output that you need. So you input all your data, you classify it based on which building elements are where, and then the result output is already aligned with the BREEAM requirements. And in the past, of course, we had the Matter 1 calculator, so specific elements of the tools are pre-verified by the BRE. The same is exactly for the BREEAM 7 calculation tool, so you don't have to worry about specific mechanisms. So then for the plus A1, plus A2, let's say split, this of course we already mentioned a little bit earlier, we now have two separate tools. So there's one for plus A1, there's one for plus A2. So you basically do the assessment in either of these. And of course, they also provide the evidence for the Matter 1 and the Matter 2, if you of course have check for the EPDs in the format that's needed already for the BRE. So you don't have to worry about formatting spreadsheets and whatnot. Let's say the evidence for your project is already in the format as it always has been for the required state. So not much has changed there. Like from let's say one-click LCA's perspective, this is just a new iteration of the BREEAM tool, which of course is compliant as we see fit. I see there has been quite a few questions also around these. So I'm trying to answer some of those, and we will of course also answer all of your questions maybe during the Q&A a bit later.
Yeah, perfect. I've also seen lots and lots of questions coming through, and I think any that we can't get to in the live Q&A we have recorded, so we can sort of round up those answers and get them out to everybody. Now, this last question is for both of you. Stephen, we can start with you. Looking ahead, how do you see BREEAM version 7 aligning with more EU-wide embodied carbon frameworks, such as the Construction Products Regulation, CPR, ESPR, things like that?
I mean, like as Alejandro already said, that they're trying to align with or they are aligning with the existing schemes. So the EN15978, which of course will also have a 2025 version out quite soon, and then of course the EN15804 for data. So yes, also under, for example, the EPBD, many national, policies in Europe will be carbon only, but at some point, that will very likely also transition to full LCA. When that will be, of course, that is the question, because the deadlines for EPBD, for example, are in 2028 and 2030, so they're still a bit in the further. But some of the key concepts there, between, let's say, the European framework or regulations and BREEAM, they will be the same. So the rules for your assessments are more clear. How you can comply is clearer. There is more focus on transparency, how we calculate things. And of course, there's the strong focus on having verified product data, so actually using more EPDs in your projects. So it is pointing, towards the future where reporting embodied carbon, becomes a routine. It's not optional anymore. People are not considering maybe we should do an LCA. Everybody will do an LCA at some point. Now, how that fully goes in Europe or like in the UK, because there's no regulations yet. Maybe we get Part Z at some point. We have to see. But of course, just having BREEAM present and having BREEAM UK is a really good step in the right direction, I think.
And Ali, do you have any other thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think just to add to what Stephen was saying, obviously one of the key things around version 7 is the use of basically because we built version 7 within the BREEAM platform is a sort of ready to plug in framework. So a lot of requirements that are require around CPR and ESPR and EU frameworks are already within BREEAM. They already coexist there. So there's no real difference there. So we already use obviously they require the use of structured EPDs. We have the data quality tiers. We also have the benchmarking. So there is a convergence, I would say, almost like at 3 level. There is the convergence around product level, building level, around BREEAM and the indicators, and then obviously policy level, because we're also looking at alignment with, for example, the EU taxonomy. So yeah, just there is a lot of alignment there that exists. Like Stephen said, there is a slight nuance in the difference between the landscape in the UK and Europe around embodied carbon policy. So it was in the UK we have more of a strong foot around, directing policy because of the lack of it. In Europe, we actually look more at aligning and trying to understand what's already there.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you both for a great discussion. Hopefully that answered a lot of our audience questions. Of course, we still have the live Q&A coming up at the end. But now I'm going to hand it over to Stephen, and he's going to present a little bit more about how one-click LCA specifically supports BREEAM version 7 compliance.
Yeah, thanks, Eileen. I'll try to keep it quite short because there is a lot of questions already open, and we of course want to answer all of them, and some of them I would like to have answers to. So that actually is very useful. So I'll walk you through how one-click LCA supports BREEAM V7 practice. So I'll try to keep it quite focused on what matters for project teams. So what if we automated? What is simplified? And where you kind of save your time and risk. I already saw a question. If we are offering these tools, yes. So if you had previously had the BREEAM UK tools on your license, you already have the BREEAM UK V7 tools on your license. So the one for plus A1 and plus A2. Now I just have to remember that I actually switched the slides myself. So basically, our tool is approved, pre-approved by the BRE, just like with the previous versions, of course. So by design, the tool is compliant. So there's a lot of things you simply don't have to worry about. You can just do your assessment and basically be done with it. So the most important thing is, because we're approved, the methodology is already built into the software. So some specific checks or how data is manipulated or how data is selected is done automatically. So all the boundaries, the modules, data set rules, credit logic, it's all handled in the software behind the scenes. So instead of having to try to interpret the let's say the technical manual or credit manual and worry about if something is modeled a certain way. The tool already enforces all those kind of rules automatically. So important one there, for example, related to data localization or these kind of things. So it gives you consistent results. Yeah, it removes a big part of, let's say, the uncertainty that maybe you sometimes have with doing this type of life cycle assessment calculations. So basically, also as one of the things that I mentioned, one of the, let's say, more challenging aspects is that we're now in this transition period between the EN5804 plus A1 and plus A2 standards. So technically, A1 ended July 2022. So since then, manufacturers are producing A2 data. But EPDs, of course, are valid for a period of 5 years. So there's plenty of manufacturers that still have the data in the older format. We have still, of course, still want to work with those. There are still some manufacturers also that have data only in plus A1 formats. They haven't updated them yet. So we have the two tools, which of course is helpful because this kind of market transition at this scale, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes many, many years. So this way we are basically ensuring that, you know, you can always use the same data. You're not accidentally mixing plus A1, plus A2. You're not wondering if you can use one or the other or not. So also for the third-party verification, it's easier if you just work with set frameworks. So if you have the plus A1 tool, it is automatically compliant with plus A1. If you have the plus A2 tool, it's automatically compliant with plus A2. So, and as I also said, the tools also have this built-in quality checks. So if you would add a plus A1 EPD to a plus A2 tool, it will flag that it cannot calculate correctly with this little warning sign, which you cannot miss. So there's built-in, let's say, redundancies if you do accidentally work with the wrong data. And of course, that already happens during the import process, but it's not only there. It's through the entire process. Also, when you're actually doing your data inputs manually, for example, these kind of things appear there. So yeah, basically, you cannot accidentally add incorrect data, which is, I think, one of the big worries that people have raised about working with, let's say, the challenges between A1 and plus A2 data. Next slide, then. So the workflow. So the outputs basically, as always, are, as I would like to say, assessor ready. So they are in the exactly right format as they need for somebody to look at your results and check if they are all reporting on the right products that you have included and whatnot. So the evidence generation part of any certification scheme, of course, is very important. So all the Meta 1 and Meta 2, and maybe some of the other credits that we support, all the data is produced automatically in the results. You can have it in the correct BREEAM format already. So all the data sets are there, all the assumptions, everything is laid out in the different columns. So you don't have to do hours of manual reporting of trying to find why specific products were chosen and whatnot, because everything is already there. And even if you import stuff, those assumptions that you have included to, let's say, your BIM model at the import process, they follow the data point through the entire project. So yeah, you can start with a simple baseline. You refine it as your design basically develops. And then, of course, you update, you change the generics to real EPDs, so your data gets more accurate. Yeah, and that process, it doesn't really matter what stage you do, but it stays consistent throughout the entire design, so you won't really lose anything for that aspect. So that is actually my really brief presentation today about how we will help, but we do have also a live webinar, which is upcoming on the 14th, I think, right? Yeah, January 14th.
Yes.
So we'll actually go through our BREEAM tool and all the things around this. Yeah, that is kind of it for today. Maybe I'll share the link to this webinar in the chat if you haven't done yet, Eileen.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Stephen. Please do share that link, and we're going to have a QR code you can use also towards the end of the webinar to sign up. So definitely sign up for that live demo. And we're going to get to the live Q&A here in just a moment. Lots of questions to go through, but really quick question for you first, the audience, is would you like to book a demo with One-Click LCA? I'm going to post a poll. And if you would like to learn more about the BREEAM version 7 tool, if you want a one-on-one consultation, just say yes to the poll that is appearing on your screen, and we will reach out to you to schedule that demo. If you're not ready for one, you can say not right now. And of course, you can come to the live demo to learn more on the 14th. All right, and with that, we will get into the Q&A. So I'm just going to minimize this again. I am going to just start going through, and if I ask this question to the wrong one of you, please just jump in, whoever is most suited to answer it. But Ali, I think that this first one will be good for you. Does BREEAM version 7 specify anything about impact compliant tools as version 6 does?
Yes, you pointed the question to the right person, I think. So this is a question that I get a lot, and I understand why, because obviously up until this point, we have had a requirement for the use of impact compliant tools, especially for benchmarking. And the short answer to that is no. There are no requirements around the use of an impact compliant tool for any of the credits within BREEAM version 7. That does not mean that you cannot use an impact compliant tool. We're getting some of those tools ready at the moment just because Impact had a big update as part of the version 7 update. So that's including more EPDs and more data points. So once we get the tools recognized, you will be able to use an impact compliant tool, including one within one click, but it's not mandatory. And I guess that's what people want to hear. So you do not have to use an impact compliant tool for the requirements that we specify in version 7.
Okay, great, thanks. Next question, are there any exemptions for life cycle stages or elements, for example, for MEP equipment, or shall they use the standard reference carbon in that case?
I'm happy to answer that too. So I guess the short answer is no, especially around the life cycle stages. So we follow you can follow rigs, for example, version 2, and around life cycle stages, there are no exceptions around what's required. Obviously, you need to follow what's within GN 51, and I explained earlier on my presentation, which is module A1 to A5, B1 to B5, and then module C and module D, depending on the EPDs that you're using. And then in terms of building elements and specifically MEP, ideally what you want to be doing is following a data hierarchy. Basically, if you can rely on EPDs, then use the EPDs. Obviously, that often is not the case for MEPs. I know the rigs obviously has an exception for the use of TM65 in the UK. We do not accept TM65, but just not because we don't like it, just simply because it's carbon only, and BREEAM version 7 is full LCA. And then after that, like I said, using the GHR hierarchy, I would say then you can rely on generic factors for the MEPs. But generally speaking, there are no exceptions as such.
Okay, perfect. And I think these next few questions will all be for you, Ale. Regarding embodied carbon benchmarks, do they change depending on the scope of the assessment? For example, fully fitted or shell and core?
The answer is yes. Obviously, the embodied carbon is heavier on fully fitted buildings rather than shell and core buildings. I have to say that the set of benchmarks that we developed for version 7 were mostly used mostly for fully fitted buildings, because we did some adjustments to the data that we had. But we also, I don't know the numbers by heart. We will publish them. I'm sure there's a question around this, but because we're still revising them. But basically, there is an average of 10 to 15% reduction between fully fitted benchmarks and shell and core to sort of allow for that drop in materiality within the building. So yeah, there is a difference.
Okay, perfect. And this next question is also about benchmarks. So it says EC benchmark, which is mentioned by you earlier, are based on past project submission. Will it take into account robust rigs to edition where EC numbers are relatively higher?
Yes, very good question, because I've had a number of meetings around that over the last couple of weeks. So if you know, or you may not know, there's been a pushback also around the UK Net Zero Carbon Building Standard limits, and they're being reviewed in line with some of the conversations I've had. I'm also reviewing the BREEAM benchmarks at the moment, because yes, people are starting to do LCAs or embodied carbon assessments in line with RICS. And what's now happening is that some of those numbers are going up considerably, which is not a bad thing. It just means that people are being more strict and robust around how they're accounting for embodied carbon, and they're taking into account more of those materials. So yes, it will be that. In short, yes, the embodied carbon benchmarks are currently being reviewed, and they likely will have an increase that's in line with what the UK Net Zero Carbon Building Standard is doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Can you clarify what is required for LCA options appraisals for concept design and technical design?
Also a question I get a lot, and I know this is a legacy question in regards to people who have been using BREEAM version 6/2018, because in that manual there was a specific requirement to the number of options appraisals that you had to do. Now, we don't have a specific requirements to the number of options appraisals you have to do at any stage for BREEAM version 7. The reason for that is because one of the strongest pieces of feedback I had when we were doing the consultation was that we needed to drop that requirement in order to be flexible enough for all the different types of buildings and projects that we get within BREEAM. There is, it's up to, in short, it's up to really the LCA consultant and the design team to decide what's a suitable amount of options appraisals for that specific project. There's obviously different expectations around, let's say, a shell-only industrial building versus a fully fitted office. The level of appraisal that you can do within those two projects will be very, very different. So no, there are no specific requirements. It's up to the LCA consultant and design team to decide what's a suitable amount of options appraisals for that project.
Okay, great. And then are you expecting an update similar to V7 for refurbishment projects in the near future?
Yes, I've been working very hard on that update for the last 3 months. We will continue to do so into the new year, and the expected release will be, I want to say, March next year. So the RFO version 7 update will be in line with the new construction version 7. And I can already tell everyone here that one of the key things that we're trying to do with RFO is to align as much as we can with new construction version 7. So a lot of the credit structure that I explained today for Matter 1 will be seen in the RFO version 7 update.
Okay, perfect. Great news. Another question, should impact carbon of demolished elements be included in the perimeter of the life cycle assessment?
Not necessarily. I would say follow RIGS version 2 compliance.
Okay, perfect. And then
we don't specify things like that within BREEAM. I have to say this goes in line with what we're saying about international schemes. It's hard for us to specify things like that because different policy and different countries do it slightly differently around those rules. So it's important that we have the flexibility. So if you're in the UK and you're following RIGS, then that's fine. You can do it in line with RIGS. But if you're in Norway and you're doing the way the Norwegians do it, then the rules might be slightly different around that.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for that clarification. How does BREEAM version 7 fit in with BREEAM in use?
We had the BREEAM in use kickoff meeting yesterday, so I don't have a specific answer to that just yet. We're just trying to figure it out. But in line with the update that we're doing for RFO, what we're trying to do with BREEAM at a product level is for users to then start thinking about BREEAM as a whole product, and then you have the different life cycle stages. So there will be an alignment piece that comes along with in use, so that when you're doing new construction or RFO, there is an easy transition into in use. So a lot of the criteria and a lot of the issues will be aligned with each other. So it's much easier for assessors to then create evidence that meets the requirements of new construction, and that can then be transferred into the in use with some small tweaks. I have to say that a very key piece of this puzzle is the BREEAM platform. So the use of a digital platform that can then just be used for all that sort of transition from between new construction into in use. But it's early days. We literally had the kickoff meeting yesterday.
You've been very busy. That's great. Now, this question, the technical stage in design and build contracts is blurred between project team at tender stage and then once the main contractor is appointed. Is it okay to submit a technical stage LCA for BREEAM at the tender stage in design and build projects?
I'm not 100% I know how to answer that question. I'll have to have a little think. If you pass me on that question after the webinar, I'll be happy to answer that.
Sure, we will keep that, and I'll send that to you along with the person who asked. Okay, getting up here, we've got, what is the added value of incorporating additional environmental indicators in relation to achieving alignment with RICS, whole building life cycle assessment, and the UK NZCBS?
Again, I think the industry as a whole is moving towards a carbon tunnel vision, which is fine in regards to the reporting of carbon. And obviously we have responsibility around the carbon emissions that we do, especially in the built environment, which is carbon heavy. But BREEAM traditionally, and will continue to do so, is a holistic certification scheme for sustainability. We don't think in carbon only terms. So we have tried to meet the demands of those two sets that those two ideas that I just said, which is why for BREEAM V7 we have a split the requirement to like do an LCA and submit the carbon. So those are different credits and they're split. But we still want people to think of the building in holistic terms. We want them to think about all the other indicators that are included with an EPD and not just the carbon indicators. So it's about just getting people to think in a holistic manner, not just carbon only. I appreciate that there obviously there's a lot of push around the policy in the industry to think in carbon terms. That's absolutely fine.
Yeah, excellent. Is verification mandatory for excellent or outstanding levels?
Not yet. I would like to make it in version 8, but not yet, because I think it's an introduction of a new credit for the international, and we're going to get a lot of technical queries and questions around this. We've included quite a lot of guidance on what constitutes the third-party verification, what the checks that need to be, and who can do the verification itself. But it's not like we've just included a new minimum standard around Matter 1. I think that would have been a step too far for the market at the moment. But it's an idea that we're certainly looking into.
Okay, perfect. And then pretty much all these questions are for you, Ale. Stephen has been answering some in the chat already, so thank you for that, Stephen, because we've got quite a few. It looks like the focus on achieving the credits shifted from the number of options assessed under 2018 or V6 to an embodied carbon benchmark focus. Does optioneering still make up a component when awarding credits?
No, it doesn't. So like I said earlier, yes, when 2018 version 6 was developed, the LCA world, or the world of embodied carbon assessments, was in a different place in terms of practice and market. Obviously, this shifted a lot. It's been over 7 years now that we published that. This is a large update that's tried to move from optioneering, like they mentioned, into performance without solely focusing on performance. And the reason why I say that is because we had a lot of feedback around the use of embodied carbon benchmarks. People want the benchmarks because they want something to measure against. I completely get it. A lot of the ESG reporting that's required by the EU taxonomy and other frameworks have shifted the industry into that sort of mindset. And again, I totally understand that. But we're also at a very early, immature stage in regards to the creation of embodied carbon benchmarks. When we talk about embodied carbon benchmarks, I like to think of it as a sort of general idea of what's expected rather than a hard limit. Obviously, for example, with the UK Net Zero Carbon Building Standard, they've had to create a hard line of what the verification is in terms of yes or no. I don't like to move that. I think we've created more of let's say, a range of what I think good looks like and bad looks like, and you sort of move within that range. And also the benchmark credits for version 7 are limited. I don't want people to think that you have to achieve a certain level of performance to get a high level of credits. It's not the case. A lot of the credits are still sort of distributed around all the other criteria: reporting, calculations, the verification, the disclosure of public information around carbon. So it's all sort of a spread around. It's not just solely focused on the performance. We have limited amount. Someone earlier mentioned around, for example, the use of RICS like carbon version 2, which is pushing the numbers up. So we need to understand how those things are shifting in the industry, and we need to then, be able to have the flexibility to shift the goalpost, if you will. Otherwise, we need to take the industry with us. We can't just make it super, super hard for people to achieve those performance levels.
Perfect. And then a little technical question. Will BREEAM release the new spreadsheet that needs to be filled in similar to the Matto 1 or Matto 2 tool?
That doesn't exist anymore. I'm glad to say that there's no spreadsheet anymore. So one of the things that we tried to do with version 7, not just Matto 1, but the entire scheme as a whole, is to move away from Excel files. Everything has been shifted into the BREEAM platform, so it exists in a digital environment. And so one click, for example, when we looked on the recognition, when you work in one click, you will generate specifically the outputs that are required for BREEAM. In this case, yes, it is an Excel file that then you just sort of copy paste into the platform, just submit into the platform. Now, this is an interim solution that we have because the platform, it's at early days. We're still developing it. In the near future, we're hoping to create that API that would allow the one-click platform with the BREEAM platform to just talk to each other. So you would just do your LCA calculations within the one click, and then you will click export to BREEAM platform, and it will be seamless. No more Matto 1 Excel calculator, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Stephen, this one is for you. Can Carbon Designer 3D be used for the BREEAM Stage 2 LCA?
That is a good question. I'm not sure if it's completely for me. I know that in the past, at least on the other schemes, we have advised that you can use outputs for Carbon Designer at concept stage when you don't have much data yet to start your assessment. What is actually your official position on this, Alejandro?
The short answer is no, because it's carbon only. But you can still the short answer is no, because it's carbon only, and Matto 1 requirements are still around full LCA.
Carbon Designer is full LCA. It's not carbon only.
Oh, right. Well, then I guess so, yes.
it is a bit how do you say? I don't know what is the English word. The name is maybe tricking you a bit. But basically, Carbon Designer, it generates outputs aligned with whatever tool you use. So,
Okay.
for example, for the BREEAM tool, we have a UK profile that gets full LCA data. If you would use the same profile for RSCS V2, obviously it will give you carbon only. But it basically is just aligned with the tool. So full LCA data. It is generic though. There's some EPDs there, but mostly generic. So, but yeah, you can use it for that.
Yeah. No, that sounds like sorry, I didn't know how the tool actually worked. That sounds really, really useful. Like I said, we don't have we've tried to be somewhat flexible around those requirements. For example, people were asking about the number of options appraisals because we used to be very inflexible around those things. But we need to understand that BREEAM caters to a large number of projects, some of which are more complex, some of which are a lot simpler. So if the use of this tool is helpful in terms of understanding those early design hotspots, then by all means go ahead and use it. We understand that a lot of projects don't have a lot of material data to do a lot of those very detailed LCA calculations at stage 2. So yeah.
Perfect. And then we actually got 2 questions about this, which is, are there other LCA tools that are going to be compatible with version 7 or other API connections for other tools?
Yes. So the LCA tools recognition process is tool agnostic. So any tool that applies to the process can then go through the recognition process, and we can approve them for version 7. I can already say that, we're going through the recognition process with other tools as well.
Perfect. Well, we, like I said, had a ton of questions. So thank you all so much for those questions. Thank you guys for your answers. We got through a lot of them, which is great. If you guys still have more questions, of course, you can always connect with any of us on LinkedIn, or you can check out One Click LCA's website. And real quick, I'm just going to pop this slide up here. This QR code is going to lead you to the BREEAM V7 tool product demo that Stephen will be doing on January 14th. So if you didn't see the link in the chat, you can scan this QR code here. And with that, we'll end off, but thank you guys so much. Alejandro, really, really great. No problem. Really great insights, really great to hear about all the updates, and very exciting. And Stephen, thank you so much for all of your technical insight into the One Click LCA tool.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
And we will see you all at the next webinar. Thanks for attending, and we'll see you next time.